We had a shipbuilding industry that was basically dying. My estimation, we had probably about 2 to 5 years left for those employees to work. A shipbuilding industry that had one foot in the grave.
Alors bien sûr, la flotte existante.
The existing fleets for both the Navy and the Coast Guard weren't getting any younger, and we knew that the fleet needed to be renewed for the long term so we could continue to fulfill our respective missions, our objectives.
I think there was an expectation that this was a major program or a major initiative of government that was doomed to fail. Just because of the fact the marine industry is a tough industry in this country. It's litigious. You superimpose upon that regional considerations. And because people thought it was going to be an unsuccessful procurement, we were generally left alone to do much of our own thing, to develop our own milestones, to develop our processes.
It's just not about pricing in risk and putting up the cost for the federal government in order to everybody trying to protect themselves. This is about what's the best value for Canada, how are we going to get good value dollar for the Canadian taxpayer, give the military what they want, and do it in a very efficient manner.
I think there was about 100 years of procurement history that gave us that feeling that in the past, procurement projects were difficult, they were clouded in secrecy, they were black boxes, they were difficult to understand and navigate, and very rarely did they actually come out on time. So unfortunately, past practices gave us an ill feeling, us being in the industry, of the next round.
On June 3, 2010, the Government of Canada launched a procurement process to competitively select 2 strategic sources of supply to build all federal vessels for a period of 20 to 30 years. 2 packages of work, 28 major vessels, $33 billion, 15,000 jobs. The procurement was to be the largest in Canadian history. There were 5 potential bidders representing all regions of Canada. All bidders would have to accept that there would be winners and losers. Large procurement, not just for military equipment but for any complex acquisition, routinely takes 4 to 7 years from concept to selection. Examples of successful expeditious procurements are hard to find. Yet despite all this, less than 500 days following the June 3rd launch, the selection process was concluded and the winners were announced almost without any negative comment. This is the story of why this procurement was uniquely successful. The policies, guidelines, rules, and regulations that normally govern procurement processes are designed to ensure that all elements of the process are open and transparent, and that all participants are treated fairly. Historically, the strict interpretation of and application of such policies and guidelines have had the goal of achieving the greatest legal certainty at lowest risk. Unintended consequences of this approach have included measured, deliberate, and often slow procurement processes, as well as minimal communication between individual bidders and the contracting authority. The challenge was to change the approach without compromising fairness. Fairness Monitor Peter Woods.
The role of the Fairness Monitor is to oversee or review the process as it takes place, and to, at the end of it, to attest to the fairness of the process.
I think we had a lot of people naysaying and doubting this process almost before the process even began.
So, what was different? How did it come to be that the NSPS has been almost universally considered the most successful procurement in Canadian history? The post-process analysis has centered on 3 critical success factors: engagement, governance, and the use of independent third parties. Let's look at each one. Peter Woods begins.
Industry engagement was a prime factor in this process. It set a standard, a very high standard, but it provided visibility into the development of the RFP, which was very important.
In July of 2009, we had a 2-day industry day event, and that was kicked off by 4 ministers, and then led by the D&D group on what they wanted for procurement. And it wasn't, this is what we're going to do, it was an ask. So we had the ability, they had some guidelines that we had to go through, but then they asked everyone to submit some discussion papers. in September of that same year. And we did that. And when what we got back for an outline showed that they had actually listened to industry as to what would be a good way forward.
Clearly, engagement means three key components must be in place: real two-way dialogue, participants helping to define the process and the evaluation, and total transparency in every communication. The second success factor was a unique governance structure that featured a collaborative partnership of key federal departments, establishing an arm's-length decision-making process and providing for an innovative dispute resolution ladder that would give potential bidders access to senior officials who were ultimately responsible for the conduct of the process. This governance provided the necessary infrastructure to establish and deliver on an aggressive project schedule. Jim Irving.
I think, the government, number one, through their secretariat and their organization, was very, very careful about making sure they were disciplined, absolutely disciplined about the whole process.
The Secretariat was very good in making sure that communication was known throughout the industry. There wasn't just one player that knew what was going on with the procurement process.
From a fairness monitoring process, I think what made it unique was the visibility it received at all levels of say, Public Works and Government Services Canada. From the Deputy Minister down, they were actively involved in the process.
The third success factor is the use of independent third parties to further enhance the credibility of the process. The use of a fairness monitor is common, but the NSPS process involved 3 additional groups who provided expert opinion or oversight on the process.
There was substantial third-party involvement in this procurement, which is much greater than the norm.
We found it interesting that PWGSC had taken a route where instead of it just being an internal plan, they involved outsiders. The Fairness Monitor, the FMI consultants that came from the UK, all of it led to credibility that really the folks outside of Ottawa really needed. And when we saw and when we heard and we met with those others that were involved, it led a certain amount of credibility to the process.
It kind of speaks to the whole philosophy on this NSPS and the Secretariat is a lot of upfront agreements.
Each of these success factors, in and of themselves, is not unique. However, taken as a group, they represent a very different way of managing complex or large-scale procurements. The effort to keep the results secret until the announcement was made were also unprecedented. 7 separate teams assessing 9 evaluation components. No sharing of scores between teams. All results coded. Treasury Board approval granted without the knowledge of the names of the bidders. And shipyards were the first to be informed of the results. And the reaction and commentary regarding the announcement of the results on October 19, 2011 amply illustrate how this process was fundamentally different. Terry Williston.
For the first time in many, many years, this is a situation where nobody knew the result before the actual announcement occurred. Unprecedented, never seen before.
I said, you mean I will know that I won before the Prime Minister of the country knows that we won? And he said, yes. Just like that, that simple, that concise, yes.
October 19th, 2011, a day I will never ever forget. I was going to get the phone call and we were all going to partake in either very, very good news or very, very bad news.
The successful bidder for the non-combat package is Vancouver Shipyard.
Pretty clear it was about 5:15 on October 19th when they announced the winners. There's no question that was our favorite moment.
The successful bidder for the combat package is Irving Shipbuilding.
Et surtout lorsqu'on écoutait
And above all, when we heard the media reports that followed, we knew then that the strategy had really reached the level of success we'd hoped for.
In fact, for these shipbuilding contracts, we launched the most open, fair, and transparent competition ever held. We made sure everyone understood the rules, actually participated in developing the rules.
Adapting and adjusting current and future procurement processes to incorporate the success factors we've talked about is already underway at Public Works and Government Services Canada. Jonathan Whitworth.
There's not a lot of times in a business or an industry cycle that you get to see game changers. They usually are span people's lifetimes. October 19th, 2011 was a game changer.
The shipbuilding procurement process has clearly been a game changer for both how procurement processes are conceived and how they are conducted. And it has been a game changer for the successful bidders and the broader marine industry. The impact of the National Shipbuilding Procurement Strategy can be measured in dollars. But the true impact of the process will be felt by the men and women who are the heart and soul of our shipbuilding industry. So, how is this a game changer with broader implications for public policy professionals and those involved in public administration? Achieving results for Canadians is, after all, the main objective of public service. And the results for Canadians of this process are clear for all to see.
It's fantastic news. I just had a baby and I don't want to be traveling halfway across the country just to make a reasonable wage, and maybe I can do it now.